Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anil Gupta from University of Jammu. Today we are going to talk on the module Resource Based View and Internal Analysis from the paper Strategic Management. At the end of this module, you will be able to understand what is the concept of resource based view of the firm, how companies can secure sustainable competitive advantage through resource-based view of the firm. We'll also understand what are the various types of resources. We'll look into the process of internal analysis and also understand what are the various methods available to conduct internal analysis of an organization. Students, firms can achieve success only if they are able to exploit opportunities and prevent threats that exist in the external environment. However, it is not easy to exploit opportunities. Firms can only exploit opportunities if they have adequate capabilities and adequate resources at their disposal. One of the important aspects is how do companies leverage the resources they have. Companies which are able to leverage resources to their advantage can only build sustainable advantage in the long run. There are various strategic paradigms that emphasize on the importance of internal resources in achieving long-term success. It's important to undertake a formal organizational appraisal to understand what are your strengths and weaknesses before the formal process of strategy formulation begins. At the end of organizational appraisal, strategists actually come to know about what are their relative strengths and weaknesses. We now discuss the resource-based view of the firm and also discuss what are the various methods of undertaking the internal analysis. Let's start with what is the resource-based view. According to the resource-based view, the competitive behavior of the firm is not the result of firm's positioning within the wider environment, but of certain unique and intrinsic features of the firm itself. The resource-based view is considered as an important perspective to understand how firms gain competitive advantage and sustain it over a long period of time. The logic behind this view is that the firms should look inward and discover their own resources and capabilities and then discover the markets where these resources can be exploited. So we can say that the resource-based view is also known as an inside-out approach. So basically what this view says is that the company should be conscious and aware of its own capabilities, competencies and resources. Depending upon what resources the firm possesses, it can try to match the resources to the external environment and then achieve sustainable advantage. Students, let us talk about resource-based view. In resource-based view, an organization is viewed as a blend of resources that enable certain capabilities, options, and accomplishments. In simple words, organizations are viewed as bundle of resources. According to this view, resources basically form the basis of value creating strategies which ultimately lead to competitive advantage. Companies compete through control of these resources, and these resources can produce superior economic returns. What are resources? As the resource-based view gives too much emphasis on the resources, it's important to understand that the resources can be both tangible and intangible assets that enable the firm to conceive of, develop, and implement strategies that ultimately improves its efficiency and effectiveness. Though the firm can possess variety of resources, yet the classification can be done into 4 categories. For example, the firm could possess financial resources. For example, equity, retained earnings is part of the financial resource. The company can possess physical resources, for example, quality machines, technology. The factories it possesses can be part of the physical resource. Or it can have human resources in terms of the knowledge and skills of its employees. And finally, the firm can possess organizational resources to its advantage. So let us describe these resource categories and see that what all it can possibly include. For example, human capital. Human capital can include the training, experience, judgment, intelligence, worker insights, management and technical team. Companies where human plays a very important role, for example, the information technology industry, the pharmaceutical industry, where they basically rely on the capacity and capabilities of the people. For example, a system like university, which is dependent upon the quality of teachers, school, which is dependent upon a quality of teachers. So for them, human capital plays a very critical role and it's a very important resource for them. The second category of resource is financial resources. So all type of financial resources that the company use to conceive and to implement strategy. For instance, financial loans, assets, royalties, rents, etc. can become part of the financial resource. The third category of resource is the physical resource, and it pertains to all the tangible goods that are in the possession of the company. For example, the quality of installations, the physical equipments it possesses, what is the technology that they have access to, the kind of organizational plants they have, as well as the geographical location where they operate can be part of the physical resource. And finally, the fourth important category is the organizational resource, which corresponds to the organizational structure, the systems of control and coordination, planning, the organizational culture, or the internal and external relationship. They can be classified as part of the organizational resource. Resource-based view basically holds that the competitive advantage is created and sustained when the resources and capability it possesses qualifies on four major attributes, which are popularly known as VRIO attributes. And on the basis of this, the VRIO framework has been proposed. Here V stands for valuable. That is the firm able to exploit an opportunity or neutralize an external threat with the resource or the capability? That is the resource really able to create some value for the consumers? Second dimension pertains to the rarity of the resource. That is the control of the resource or the capability in the hands of relative few. Do others have access to similar resource, or do you have an exclusive access to a particular resource? That can really translate into a real competitive advantage. Your I stands for inimitable. That is, can your competitors copy your capability? Can the competitors copy your resource? If the answer is yes, there would be no advantage for you. But if it is difficult to imitate, if it is difficult to duplicate, then the real advantage gets accrued to you. So which means that the resource should be inimitable. And finally, how organized is the firm? How ready is the firm to exploit the resource and capability? As I discussed earlier, and I once again emphasize here, that mere possession of resource does not guarantee success. It is important that how does the company really exploit the resources to their advantage. So resource should qualify on all these four attributes if the sustainable advantage has to get accrued to a particular firm. We now look into the assumptions of resource-based view. Resource-based view basically holds two important assumptions. The first is about resource heterogeneity. That is, different firms may have access to different resources. It's a very difficult scenario where two firms have exactly same resources. There will always be some difference as far as the quality and quantity of this resource is concerned. The second assumption of the resource-based view is resource immobility. That is, it will be costly for firms without certain resources to acquire and develop them. So it's not as easy that the resources are mobile. So there is some cost attached in terms of acquiring and developing the resources. And some resources may not spread from firm to firm that easily. So based on these two assumptions, there is a significant assumption that the competitive advantage can really be built. So these assumptions basically mean that if one firm has resources that are valuable and other firms don't have, and if other firms can't imitate these resources without incurring high cost, then the firm possessing these valuable resources will likely to gain competitive advantage. So that is, the heterogeneity and the immobility plays a critical role in building up the competitive advantage for the firms. Let's look at this figure that what the resource-based view basically proposes. Resource-based view says that firms relies on resources which are tangible and intangible, and on the basis of assumption that these resources must be heterogeneous and must be immobile and should qualify on the VRIO attributes, then only these resources become VRIO resources. And any firm that is in the possession of the VRIO resources can ultimately have competitive advantage in the long run. So the question that the firm has to answer is that is the resource or the capability valuable? If the answer is no, the company does not have any advantage, rather it is competitively disadvantageous position for the company. But if the resource is valuable, the next test is the resource rare? If the answer is no, that results into a situation called as competitive parity. But if the resource is valuable as well as rare, then the next question that the firm has to ask is it costly to imitate the resource or capability? If the answer is no, then there is some advantage, but then it's only a temporary competitive advantage for the company, because your competitors will come and try to imitate your capability or your resource. But if it is costly to imitate and the firm is organized to capture the value from this resource, then it results into sustained competitive advantage. Else the competitive advantage is only temporary in nature. So which means that the VRIO framework or VRIO attributes are very critical on the basis of which the resources or capabilities should be evaluated. Now we will talk about the organization internal analysis. Students, the purpose of organization internal analysis is to identify organizational capability in terms of its strengths and weaknesses that lie in different functional areas. For any strategic planning system to work, it is essential to adopt a systematic approach of conducting the internal analysis of the organization. Systematic approach works like a proactive measure, and only such internal analysis works like a prerequisite to the strategy formulation process. To conduct organizational appraisal or internal analysis, strategists can use both the external as well as internal resources. Your competitors, your customers, your collaborators can become a rich source of information that can guide you that how are you perceived in terms of your strengths and weaknesses. The internal analysis not only helps in assessing your present situation, but it also presents a long-term perspective that how your strengths and weaknesses will really help you in the future. What are the factors that influence the internal analysis process? Some of the factors that are highlighted here include: what is the value system of the company? What is the vision and mission of the company? What is the nature of the management structure that is present in the company? The internal power relationship also influence the internal analysis process. The quality and the quantity of human resources is another factor that can influence the internal analysis. What is the image of the company and the brand equity? The kind of physical assets and facilities a company owns. What are the various technological capabilities and the marketing resources that are in possession of the company? So these factors to an extent influences how the internal analysis is actually conducted within the organization. There are various methods of conducting the internal analysis, and these are categorized under three broad categories, including the internal analysis frameworks, your comparative analysis, the comprehensive analysis. Internal analysis includes the VRIO framework, which we discussed just now. The next important framework that is used is the value chain analysis. Companies also rely on various quantitative and qualitative approaches to do an internal analysis. Along with the internal analysis, comparative analysis plays a critical role, where the historical analysis is done, industry norms are identified, and benchmarking approach is used to analyze the position of the company with the best in the industry. And finally, the business intelligence system and the balance scorecard is used to do the comprehensive analysis that helps to achieve the internal analysis process. As we have already talked about the VRIO framework, we will now talk about the second approach in the internal analysis, that is the value chain analysis. This concept was given by a professor from Harvard Business School, Michael Porter, and he described value chain as the internal processes or activities a company perform to design, market, deliver, and support its product. Porter described two major categories of business activities, which was divided as primary activity and secondary activity. The primary activities are directly involved in transforming inputs into outputs and delivering the after-sales service. Most of the value for customer is created by these primary activities. Whereas the secondary activities are support activities, and these activities facilitate the performance of the primary activities. So look at this figure that depicts the value chain of a company. If you look, the primary activities are given below, which include 5 different activities, including inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and after sales service. Whereas the support activities are the firm infrastructure, human resources, technology development, and procurement. If you critically look into this figure, the support activities cut across all the primary activities, which means the support activities actually facilitate the primary activities. And it is the combination of all these activities that ultimately result into the margin that the firm is able to generate. Let us now describe each of these primary activities and understand that what each activity basically means. So the first primary activity is inbound logistics. All these activities which are concerned with receiving and storing externally sourced material become part of the inbound logistics. The second primary activity is operations, which pertains to the manufacturing process in which the resources is converted into the output. That is how the raw material gets converted into the end product that the firm intends to create. The third primary activity is outbound logistics. That is, all those activities which are associated with getting finished goods and services to the buyers. So the product that has been created has ultimately to reach the end consumer. The fourth primary activity is marketing and sales. So essentially an information activity which informs the buyers and the consumers about the product and services. And finally, the last primary activity is service, which is associated with maintaining the product performance after the product has been sold. So according to Michael Porter, any organization basically is involved into these 5 primary activities. Similarly, there are 4 secondary activities of the value chain framework, which includes procurement. Procurement is concerned with how the resources are acquired for the business. So all resources that the company require, how is the company acquiring those resources become part of the procurement. So procurement essentially is important in all the primary activities, whether it is the inbound logistics, whether it is the operations, whether it's the outbound logistics, after sales service or marketing. The next secondary activity is human resource management, which is concerned with recruiting, developing, motivating and rewarding the workforce of a business. The third secondary activity is technology development, which is concerned with managing information processing and the development and protection of knowledge in a business. And finally, infrastructure is concerned with wide range of support systems and functions such as finance, planning, quality control, and general senior management. There are various benefits of this value chain analysis, which includes that first of all, it helps you to do a cost-benefit analysis at various levels. As you are doing the internal analysis, it's important to know that which of these activities that you do really helps in value addition at the corporate level. It's an important framework that helps you to identify that what are the real competence of the firm. And based on the analysis, company can actually decide that which of these activities do not add value and therefore they should be outsourced to some other agency. So the outsourcing decisions are based on a strong value chain analysis to identify profit pools, that which are the areas that really help in contribution towards the profit. And it can create a strong value network for the company. That is the inter-organizational links and relationships to create the valuable product. Today, the concept of value network is gaining acceptance because the entire supply chain has to add value for the consumers. The logistics gets improved by at the end of this analysis, and enhanced customer order management systems can be created, which ultimately result into customer satisfaction. Though there are benefits of the value chain analysis, but it is not devoid of certain limitations. The first limitation is, though it is simple to understand, but when it comes to actual implementation, it's really very tricky. Second, this framework is more relevant to the manufacturing setups. So it is difficult to adapt the same framework in the context of service organizations. The next limitation is that its truly comparable activities may be difficult to identify. And without proper information, the real benefit of the value chain analysis does not get accrued to the organization. So information collection may be really difficult to obtain for the organizations. The next methodology that can be used is the quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis is a scientific approach to managerial decision making, whereby the raw data is processed and manipulated, resulting into meaningful information. Today, companies have access to so much of data, what is popularly today known as big data. Applying technological mechanisms to analyze that information can result into real useful information for decision making. So, 2 types of analysis which can be done includes the financial analysis and the non-financial analysis. Companies have access to technology, they have access to real-time data. So the financial analysis can help to identify that how the companies can improve the profitability. Is there any scope to cut down on the cost? Are there any resources that are not being implemented or utilized properly? So such analysis is possible using various methods. Similarly, customer-based information, for example, can be classified under the non-financial analysis. So for example, a company could be interested to know that which are the product variants that are really selling at a particular given point of time. Using the technology, companies can connect the retail outlets directly to their production planning department. And the production can be customized as per the requirement or projection of what the dealers or retailers are telling. The various benefits of quantitative analysis include accurate representation of reality, it gives insight and information, and above all, it facilitates decision making to the advantage of the company. The next method of internal analysis includes the comparative analysis. And in this, the benchmarking analysis plays a very important role. When we talk of benchmarking analysis, we basically say that the business process of the company should be compared with the best in the industry. Three types of benchmarking can be done, which includes your process benchmarking, the performance benchmarking, and the strategic benchmarking. This technique can really help companies to gain competitive advantage. It can help to understand what the competitors are doing and in the long run try to reduce the cost. Companies can also undertake historical analysis where the current year performance can be analyzed vis-a-vis your previous year performance. Let's now talk about the comprehensive analysis approach. Students, it's important to view any business from a holistic perspective. Businesses are not compartmentalized. Though there could be advantages in one particular department or one particular functional area of the business, yet having a holistic perspective or a comprehensive analysis can actually give a lot of insights to the top management. There are various methods that are available to do this comprehensive analysis. Some of the popular methods include key factor rating. There is another method called as business intelligence. And another technique which is very popular is the balanced scorecard. We'll discuss briefly about each of these various methods, though there is enough literature to go deep into and study what these techniques are. If we talk about the key factor rating, that takes into account what are the key factors that affect the organizational functioning. There is something called as critical success factors. For each business, there are certain factors that ultimately contribute to the success of any organization. And it's imperative for organizations to identify these factors and then examine that how are they performing as far as these factors are concerned. The basic idea is that if you really want to improve the functioning of any business, try to improve these key factors that affect the organizational functioning. These critical factors, which are generally limited in number, should be identified. For example, what is the critical factor as far as the airline industry is concerned? If you talk of the airline industry, one of the critical success factor is that how fast, how quickly you are able to move out of the airport. So once the airplane lands at the airport, how fast it is able to move to the next destination, because that cuts down the cost. If we talk of the logistics industry, it is the reliability of the delivery and the safety of the delivery that can actually become as a critical success factor. So the task for in front of any top management is to identify these critical success factors and then rate yourself that how well are you doing on these factors. The next approach is the business intelligence approach. Students, business intelligence basically represent various tools and systems that play a critical role in strategic planning process within the corporation. These business intelligence systems allow a company to gather, store, access, and analyze corporate data to aid the decision making process. Technology here plays a very critical role. Today, management talks about a strong management information system, and strategists are talking beyond the information system. They're talking about the intelligence. A company which has good intelligence can ultimately respond to the external environment in a much better way. Company can identify that what are the strength area, what are the weak area, and therefore which are the areas that it really need to develop in order to be really competitive. Finally, the third and the most important tool that is available to do a comprehensive analysis is the balance scorecard. Balance scorecard is one of the strategic planning tool that can be used to assess the performance of an organization. And this tool also helps to identify what are the areas that need improvement so as to gain competitive advantage. Students, the balance scorecard takes a balanced view of the organization by looking into 4 different perspectives. It looks into the financial perspective, it looks into the customer perspective, the internal business perspective, and learning and growth perspective. We have a complete module on this subject and you can listen to that. So students, let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. We talked about the resource-based view, which is considered as an important perspective to understand how to gain competitive advantage and also how do we sustain it over a period of time. We talked about resource-based view, which views organization as a blend of resources and enables certain capabilities, options, and accomplishments. Firm resources include both tangible and intangible assets that enable the firm to conceive of, develop, and implement strategies that improve its efficiency and effectiveness. We also discussed about VRIO attributes and how these VRIO attributes are important to ensure sustainable advantage. While discussing the assumptions of resource-based view, we discussed about the concept of resource heterogeneity and resource immobility. Finally, we discussed about the internal analysis, and we also discussed various methods that can be used to do this analysis, including the VRIO framework. We talked about the value chain analysis, how quantitative and qualitative analysis can play a role, and we concluded our discussion by talking about the comparative analysis and the comprehensive analysis approach. Thank you.